Hello, my name is Ribeiro. I'm a researcher at the Forest Fire Research Center of ADAI, University of Coimbra in Portugal. In this video, I will briefly show you some recent episodes of fire in the wild and urban interface here in Portugal. As you may know, the wild and urban interface can be simply defined as the space where vegetation and structures coexist in a fire-prone environment. I would add to this definition the people, the population, which are often the beginning and the end of this problem. This problem is of special concern when the fire risk is in its extreme, because it conditions every firefighting strategy, as you can see by this picture. I will talk to you about three recent episodes and marking episodes that happened here in Portugal. The first one in the island of Madeira. You may know this picture from the media. 2,000 hectares were burned, which may not be a lot in several countries, but for the Madeira Island, which is a small island, is quite a lot. It corresponds roughly to a little bit over 2.5% of the entire area. 251 houses were damaged, 154 destroyed, 3 persons died inside their homes, and the huge loss of around 157 million euros of damage were registered, not only for this fire but for all the fires that happened in the island that you can see here at the eastern part, the Funchal fire, and in the western part, another large fire, but this area is not as populated as this near the capital of the island. So the fire weather index on the island was in its extreme in almost every island apart from these two weather stations in the north. And this fire started right in the outskirts of the city. You can see here the urban area of Funchal with its port. And the fire started in the outskirts right in the interface where the city ends and the mountain begins. With the north wind that was prevailing at the time, the fire was pushed downwards, not upslope, and this was critical because this area is very steepy, and so the fire would be clearly going upslope very fast. But the fire started spreading laterally, and then entering even in the city perimeter through what we call Ribeiros in Portuguese, which are very deep water lines. So in the first night, this hospital had to be evacuated. People were sheltered or relocated to military facilities. And then in the next morning, the fire started or continued spreading upslope in some parts of the northern area or of the northern front of the fire, but it also started entering in these two water streams right to the center of the city. And here something curious happened. So the fire spread downwards towards the sea and the city center, and then on the margins of the water line, the fire started to go upwards. By this time, 600 persons had to be reallocated, 36 houses burned, another hospital had to be evacuated, and this Chopina Hills Hotel, it's a 5-star resort, also was evacuated around 4 p.m. And by that night, what was a very nice hotel composed of a single building, a common building, and around 60 bungalows was almost entirely destroyed. So the fire continued propagating down, and 3 persons were caught inside their homes here. You can see this is the place where those 3 persons lived, those houses. The fire came from here and then upslope, and people were caught from a forest fire right inside the city. Also, from the shower of burning embers that came from the main fire front, a lot of houses started to burn in the historical center of the city. You can see they are completely surrounded by urban structures. There are no forest fuels here. They are inside, in the heart of the town, and they were completely destroyed by those burning embers. This is the final area of the Funchal fire, and you can see it penetrated deeply inside the city perimeter, and some houses burning here inside, far away, at least more than 1.5 kilometers from the nearest fire front. So the second case is Pedrógão Grande, probably the most infamous and fire that we have records here in Portugal, the deadliest one at least. Although we call it the Pedrógão Grande fire, it is in fact a complex of several wildfires, as you can see here and by these colors. This is an image of its propagation with the timestamps. About 45,000 hectares were burned, killing 66 people and injuring more than 200. More than 1,000 structures were damaged or destroyed, and almost the entire area burned on June 17, the first day, from 4 p.m. and June 18. So from 4 p.m. of Saturday until the end of Sunday, almost all the area had burned. At the end of day one of Saturday, in 3 hours, we had almost 9,000 hectares burned, which corresponds roughly to 3,000 hectares per hour, which is very rarely recorded in fires, at least in Portugal. We did an extensive survey regarding the impact of this fire on the structures, and focusing on the Pedrógão Grande area, not this part, but only this central part, we visited every single affected structure by this fire, talking with people, observing the structures, and fulfilling a previously built database that allowed us to make some analysis. This is an example of the analysis that we performed. For instance, regarding the type of structures, we can see that around 25% were related to housing, either permanent or temporary, and then most of them were sheds or storage, about 40% of the structures. Almost all were of advanced age, around 30 years, and the type of construction is typical, the same as most European countries, which is either concrete or stone. Regarding the ignition, we have seen similar patterns all over the world. That means houses don't ignite when the fire front reaches them. They ignite mainly due to flying embers that get deposited in vulnerable places like roofs. So you see here, fagulhas means embers, 61%, and then roofs and windows are the preferred spots for the embers to deposit and ignite the structures. This 61% could eventually be increased because if we had this 130 from materials burning in the vicinity, most times these materials were ignited also due to embers. So the embers did not ignite the house itself, but they ignited materials in the vicinity of the houses, which then ignited the house. So this could simply come up to 75% of structures being burned by embers. We would say that usually houses are considered as a safe place here in Portugal and maybe all over Europe. But for this to happen, those houses need to be kept in good conditions, especially in what regards to natural and artificial fuels in its vicinity. If we can keep our homes in good conditions and well managed, they are a safe place to stay. From all the 66% that died in this fire, only 4 died at home, and they all had some difficulties, some locomotion difficulties. So you can see people died running away from the fire, and then we came up to see that their homes were perfectly safe after the fire passed away. And another thing that we noticed in this fire, if you cannot stay at home, or if you are not encouraged to stay at home, and if evacuations are planned, they must be planned quite in advance to the reaching of the fire front. Because if you plan or do an evacuation where the fire is coming, it can very easily turn into an uncontrolled escape, and people can very easily be caught by the fire. Another example was the fires from October, and this was in a very different scale from Pedrógão, which was already in a different scale from Madeira. In Madeira, we were talking about 2,000 hectares. In Pedrógão, 45,000 hectares. And here in October, we are talking about 51 persons dying, but in an area burned of around 220,000 hectares all across the central region. So you can see here, this is the aspect. You have a sort of a scale here. All these fires combined into more than 200,000 hectares, killing 51 persons. We could not do, due to the scale, we could not do here the same that we did in Pedrógão, visiting every single structure that was affected, because there were thousands of structures affected. But we tried to approach this in a different way, which was visiting the industrial areas of some specific areas, fires, at least one in each of the major fires. And we visited a total of 140 industries, most of them with less than 10 employees, but also some large ones. And we could see that most of these industries were related to civil construction or construction materials, to wood or cork, and to vehicles or professional machinery. And almost half of these industries were totally destroyed, with a very large percentage also of severe destruction. When we analyzed fuels and the ignition mechanisms, we could see similar pattern to what we observed in Pedrógão, which is that the majority was burned due to ember projections, but also from flames coming from the near forest areas that are surrounding these industrial areas. So regarding the mechanisms of ignition, still we saw that the majority of the embers went inside the industrial areas by several openings or roofs or wall. Roofs and windows were the major entrance point in the houses, but here we also have walls that are sometimes are not completely closing the structures, so to say, and very different openings that we can find, for instance, near the walls, where the wall meet the roofs. Some factories have some openings which allow the embers to come inside. So wrapping up, in these industries, they are really well prepared to sustain industrial fires that happen inside, but they are rarely prepared to support or to withstand fires that come from the outside. There are usually no or little protection against embers that come flying from the main fire fronts. The fuels in the surroundings are really poorly managed globally, and we have a problem regarding the accumulation of raw materials and waste or equipments next to the facilities. So we believe that for these cases, as well as for homes nowadays, self-protection systems, being active or passive, are essential in the protection of houses, structures, or industrial facilities whatsoever. And that's it. Hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you.